Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. We're going to talk today about a one-season wonder, a show that didn't last, but maybe should have, and I would say for certain deserves to be watched. The show begins with an alert, and an admiral orders his fighting ships to deploy. The men race into the hangar and they get into their ships, do their systems checks, thumbs up, ready to go. They launch these magnificent vessels and they know that they're going to head into combat. Combat from an orbiting base in the rings of Saturn to strike out against an enemy warship commanded by an evil lord. It is StarCom, the U.S. Space Force. A 1987 cartoon from DIC Animation and Coca-Cola Telecommunications. Who knew? So what is this thing all about? How did I even find it? Well, I actually found it random. It was in a cartoon compilation online that I kind of scurried through just seeing if there was anything interesting. This thing popped up, caught my attention. I went and sought it out. There's only a few episodes of it. Didn't go that far. But the first episode really impressed me. So let's get down to the basics. StarCom, or I guess you could say really Star Command, protects the United Solar System from the machinations of the Shadow Empire and their self-proclaimed Emperor Dark, while also supporting scientists, researchers, colonists throughout the solar system. The primary protagonists of StarCom are Colonels John Slim Griffin, Field Commander of Starbase Command, Paul Crowbar Corbin, Field Commander of the Astro Marines, and James Dash Derringer, Field Commander of the Star Wing. So we have these three branches. Now, in truth, these guys sort of just do whatever. It doesn't break the mission down all that carefully between them. But it's a little bit like G.I. Joe in outer space, including in as much as it is based on a toy line with little troops, with little vehicles, with a little biographical information. All the figures have names. So not too different from that. Now, it takes place in the United System, I guess. I think I said United Solar System. I think it's just called the United System. So that's what US apparently stands for. Although I don't think it really initially did, because as you saw with the one logo, there was an American flag. We have Fort Bragg in outer space. Seems like it was meant to be the United States, StarCom. But the show proved to be more popular overseas than in the United States, where it was a syndicated cartoon. There may have been an attitude of, well, we need to maybe dial that down a bit. Although, I don't know, G.I. Joe did pretty well. So there's an interesting series Bible that was put together that a few elements from end up in the show and a few don't. One of them was the idea that there were these mystical obelisks, one of which being on Mars. Another one I think was supposed to be on Pluto that hadn't been discovered yet, that the Shadow Empire was trying to get a hold of because they offered some sort of power. There's a little suggestion to something similar, but not really the obelisks. The Shadow Empire also in the Bible reads a lot like Cobra Command. It's sort of this, it has like these front companies. And it does own property on different planets in the solar system and owns smaller companies within. And so it's not like a alien empire that's invading the solar system. It's a guy, apparently an ex-scientist, who thinks he needs to take over everything to introduce his glorious rule, what have you. And he has all these mercenaries at his deploy. We also get a cat who shows up in the intro, who only shows up a couple other times. Seemed like he was going to be a bigger part of it. So some things didn't transfer through. We do get a lot of cool things, though, that are in the Bible and do show up in the show. And I think really it's a kid's show, but I think it's pretty close to being hard sci-fi rather than sci-fantasy. It's got some cool elements that they do some work on making make sense, even though you still get dogfights in outer space and things of that nature. So what do we get? Well, we got the StarCom's headquarters, like I said, is in the rings of Saturn, which is pretty cool. It's built on like I don't know if you call it an asteroid, I guess, or meteor. Asteroid, I think, right, is when it's in space, a meteor. Okay. All right, hold on. I know, I forget some of these things at times. I'm a bad nerd. You get these floating research stations in the atmosphere of Jupiter, which is really, really cool. You have colonies on some of the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. You have a colony, a giant base on the moon. You have colonies and even farming on Mars and some of like the trenches, which is kind of cool. So good setting. You got your characters, you got your spaceships, etc. It's definitely some world building went into this, and I think if it had lasted longer, we would have gotten more of that. Produced by Richard Reynes, executive producer Andy Hayward, creative supervisor Bobby London, script coordinator Laurie Crawford. I'm throwing these names up here because they really did some excellent work and deserve to be recognized for it. You get really good design elements, and you saw a few of them. Good sci-fi design elements in terms of the space. Of course, some of this is based on the toy line, and they do a good job of translating the toys into the cartoon and making this stuff work. You have really good animation. I'm very impressed with it. Now, I've been critical sometimes of DIC in terms of they don't do sort of the hand-to-hand combat terribly well. Sometimes it's a little doesn't flow all that well. Here, it's a lot of spaceship combat. It's sort of laser weapons and stuff, and it comes off really well. They do a nice job with it. You also get a sense of this StarCom organization, and organizations maybe beyond it as well, reflected in some of the uniforms that you see here over the next few. It gives it that thing. I'm a uniform guy. I admit it. I like Star Trek. I like those science fiction things that hinge on a sort of military model. Not necessarily militaristic, but a military model, because I think it makes sense in the context of getting out and exploring a solar system or exploring the galaxy or what have you. So you can see we have flight suits. Now that guy has the emblem of the Astro Marines on his suit. There's different colors for the different sections, if you will. You see the little square on the other breast appears to me to be sort of like a commendation sort of thing, like the medals that guys would wear across their chests. Enlisted personnel seem to have a rank stripes on their sleeves. Officers, you never quite get exactly how the rank is depicted on those. But you have a wide variety of people on different space stations. You got your maintenance guys. We do get some robots, although they do not feature really, really prominently. Although one does feature somewhat more prominently in the Shadow Empire. You kind of see like what their uniforms look like outside of the spacesuits. There's like full spacesuit with weapons. There's some dress uniforms. Here's just a person in their quarters getting ready to take a shower. Here we see our three main protagonists playing something like a combination of high-lie and racquetball in zero gravity, which is kind of cool. Here we see some more guys. And you can see some of the rank emblems on that one guy's sleeve. So I like it. It grounds it. And that's what I get from this show. It is somewhat grounded. Not every episode is the Shadow Emperor has an evil plan and it must be foiled. In fact, oftentimes the plans come from his underlings. So you do get that aspect of it, but you get some other interesting ideas in the show as well. The Shadow Empire, they have their own emblem, that sort of triangle thing on the guy's chest. So they have their own, their own emblem, their own maybe rank structure going as well. Obviously, they're the bad guys, so they look kind of bad and they behave kind of bad. They have a whole bunch of drone troopers, which means that the good guys can actually blow the bad guys up here and there. We get cool vehicles. We get the Star Wolves, which can operate in atmosphere and can operate in space. We got the bad guys have the, what were they called? Shadow Bats. We have the larger vehicles. The Star Wolves actually can fit onto the back of that. Now, one aspect of the toys that was a selling point was called Magna Lock. The characters had magnets in their feet, and you got magnets in some of the vehicles that would allow the characters to stick onto things, etc. And they actually worked that in a reasonable way. Oh, here we see the Star Wolf landing on the I know I'm right now, of course, forgetting the name of that particular vehicle. You know I was going to do that eventually. But they make it work. It's the space suits. They can magnetize so they can stick to their vehicles. And they actually make it a plot point a few times. So a nice job. But we get some other vehicles as well. There's an emblem of the Magna Lock working. One of my favorites was this large, and they made it sound like it was an older, I guess you can call it kind of a space cruiser. And it was called the Theodore Sturgeon. Great sci-fi writer. So I liked that. But we do see a few spaceships in it. They struck me as being somewhere between realistic and Star Wars, but mostly realistic. It actually reminded me a little bit of Space Angel and some of the designs in that. We also get land vehicles because, of course, we have the Astro Marines, so we do get some stuff that occurs on planet surfaces as well. And of course, the bad guys have their own ground vehicles. So as I said, based upon a series of toys, here you can see some of the catalog pages. They do a pretty good job, like I said, of translating from toy into the animation and making it work. I think the one problem with the toys, and I'm going to show you an example because I did buy one. And this is Dash Derringer. He would have come with a backpack. He would have come with a weapon. I don't have those, but this gives you a little idea. These guys are tiny. They're there we go. They're quite small. Now, not necessarily a bad thing. It allows you to do some interesting things with the vehicles. But, you know what? He's supposed to have Magna Lock. I wonder if do I have anything metal I could stick him to? I don't know. I have a ruler. Let me stick to my swing line ruler. He sticks to my ruler. Oh, that's cool. Dude, I could stick anyways. Okay. We're off topic now. I think the problem with the scale, and this is a problem sometimes with toys, it's out of scale with everything else that was going on at the time. Just about. It's not in scale with G.I. Joes. It's 87. It's a little bit after the sell-by date for Star Wars figures. The G.I. Joes were still going, Masters of the Universe, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, etc. This doesn't really go with any of those. So if you're going to buy into the line, you can't use them to play with any of your other toys. And for a lot of kids, especially in the 80s, things weren't as cheap comparatively then as they are now, you had to make choices. So do I want to embark on these guys and try to convince mom and dad to buy enough of them for me that I could get a good game going? Or do I want to get a few more G.I. Joes, Masters of the Universe, etc.? I think that was a problem with these. Ultimately, they did not sell well enough to keep the cartoon alive. Although, again, they did apparently sell better in Europe than in the United States. Now, that being said, they're pretty cool toys. There's actually pretty good detail on these figures, as small as they are. And the vehicles look pretty rad. I mean, I could totally see myself having fun with this stuff when I was a kid. The one vehicle that to me was a little off, a little odd, was that of the Shadow Emperor. You have sort of the little face on the front of it. Kind of reminds me of Thomas the Tank Engine, if he worked for the Galactic Empire. I don't know. It's a little odd. Not too bad. Doesn't show up an awful lot. You get some nice flourishes, though, with the sci-fi setting. In Jupiter's atmosphere, you have these things. I think they refer to them as sky whales or air whales. And the Predator is a kite. And these things, nice design. They remind me of stuff from Carl Sagan's Cosmos. They do feature prominently in the first episode as they're being threatened by these automated mines that are set to just kill about anything. Good episode, a smart episode. That's one of the real strengths of this series. It's pretty smart sci-fi for a kid's show, but it's actually pretty smart even for adult shows. A lot of the work done creating this was done by Brynne Stevens. She deserves an immense amount of credit. She did a fantastic job on this thing. And so, like I said, in that first episode, you have these researchers on this station. It gets hit by these mines that are just sort of dropped by the Shadow Empire because they don't really care who gets hurt. We have a really interesting episode on Mars where a couple kids, a niece and nephew of Slim, are out with this, with another StarCom guy. They're just sort of joyriding in this Mars buggy. And they end up finding, I think there was like a storm or something. And they wind up I think there was a Mars quake is what it was. They end up in this ancient, I don't know what you'd call it, underground city, underground complex of people who once lived on Mars. And they have to be rescued. Again, smart sci-fi. There seems to be breathable air, but they say, let's keep the helmets on. But at a certain point, they have to take them off. But they're a little worried about that. And we do get this hint that one of these ancient Martians, or maybe multiples, still live somewhere within this complex and are involved in this. And they leave them with this artifact. We don't hear from that artifact again. But again, if they'd gotten more episodes, we might have. There's also a good episode, a training cruise on the Theodore Sturgeon, that ends up turning violent when the Shadow Empire goes after this unarmed old vessel. Again, a lot of smart stuff. Good work on characters having dilemmas, how to solve problems, moral choices. There's some good references too, Theodore Sturgeon being one of them. First episode, though, we get these guys playing Fizbin. Basically, they're tricking Slim, who is sort of a by-the-book kind of guy, into believing Fizbin is a real game. Obviously, good reference to Star Trek. We get a few of those. At one point, they mention Cadet Buzz Corey. Buzz Corey was the main character in Space Patrol, old 50s sci-fi. I like when I see stuff like that because it tells me the people writing it are fans of sci-fi. You're not pulling Buzz Corey out of nowhere. You're probably not pulling Fizbin out of nowhere. So that's pretty cool. I think if there is a problem with the show, the voice work is okay. Sometimes good, sometimes really not that good. And that lends itself to the bigger problem, which is the characters, for the most part, are not super memorable. G.I. Joe, I think, did a better job with that in terms of their cartoon, of the characters registering with you, and you really dug them, and you knew the code names. Not everybody gets a code name. Lieutenant Bob Anderson, not necessarily going to be a very memorable character. The three leads, somewhat more. You do get some nice character moments in the show. The one character that stands out, she's in about 3 episodes, probably should have been in more, is General Malvana Wild of the Shadow Empire. Her backstory, which they don't really touch on so much in the cartoon, but it's in the Bible, was she was a scientist who was dying, who got caught in some kind of odd explosion that kept her alive and sort of turned her evil. She's got real personality. In the show, she was pretty fun, scheming against the Shadow Emperor, to try to get ahead, trying to use her fellow members of the Shadow Empire to sort of maybe get her into command. She was cool. She was a fun character. But other than that, I don't think they resonate strong enough. And again, the figures that are this big, you get a little bit more out of the G.I. Joes. Also, the uniforms, which I love, don't make each of the characters look all that individual. And I think that probably hurt it a little bit. But again, great design, some great sci-fi vistas, some very smart stuff. They do have something like a warp drive, which is clearly just used for traveling within the solar system. So they're not going outside of it to other planets, but it's kind of a cool sequence as these ships emerge from it. You also get an image of a ship being chased through it by a bad guy. So you kind of see what that looks like. Good graphics, good animation, smart design. You can see the robots. It doesn't feel like something that is strictly hard sci-fi. This is all based on reality. But it's not as sci-fantasy as, say, Star Wars is. I'd put it sort of in the camp of like a Star Trek. In that balance between sci-fantasy and hard sci-fi. It's a really solid show. You can find it on YouTube. I'm sure you can find it elsewhere. I highly suggest you go give StarCom a chance. Maybe the sci-fi wasn't quite right for kids, and that was, of course, the demographic they needed to hit. But I think it holds up really well. And again, very nicely animated. So maybe go give it a check. I'd probably give it like a C+, and with a little tinkering, it could have gone to a B-. And maybe with more episodes, it could have gone higher than that. I think they had a really interesting solar system to explore. And they did. We get stuff on Mercury. We get stuff on, it was a Titan. They make use of it. And again, they wear their environment suits. It's not like people are breathing in outer space. Even on Mars, there's a need to wear environment suits, except in the trenches. You kind of get this feeling that maybe they've managed to get enough atmosphere on Mars that in these trenches, people can breathe and they could grow crops. Maybe a little wild, but not so bad. Makes for a good episode, though. Smart writing. Worth checking out. So what do you think? Do you know StarCom? Did you watch it back in the day? Are you a fan? Do you just have some questions about it? Or maybe you weren't a fan. Love to hear from you in the comments. Love to chat with you there about this show. I enjoyed it. I suggest you go check it out, and maybe you'll enjoy it too. Remember to like, subscribe, share with a friend this video if you would. It helps me out. So until next time, next review, God bless everybody. Be kind to one another. Try to have some fun. Watch StarCom. You might enjoy it. And hopefully I'll see you next time soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.